Australia, proudly known as the lucky country, the land of sun-drenched beaches, stable institutions, and rising living standards, is under threat.
Wealth inequality, runaway property prices, and resource dependency are colliding to threaten the very social fabric of Australia. Coupled with that, we have a gambling problem, and our government spends too much.
More than $1 trillion in government debt is matched by world record levels of household debt. Yet despite this, more and more Australians are renting. The number of people on welfare has grown exponentially since the introduction of the NDIS, and wages have not kept pace with inflation. Australia still ranks among the world's richest nations, with median wealth second only to Luxembourg. Yet for many Aussies, the ladder to prosperity is slipping away. That's because the wealth isn't shared around. It's the money at the very top that's creating an illusion that Australia is doing better than it really is.
According to the latest wealth inequality data, the gap between haves and have-nots is getting greater. The top end of town are doing well, but the rest of Australian society are being left behind.
When wealth is tied to property and superannuation, assets most younger Australians just don't have, that inequality becomes intergenerational. The next political battleground risks putting parents against the youth, retirees against first-time job hunters. Such fights might get ugly, reflected in the way parliaments form around the interests of sections of the electorate increasingly isolated from each other.
It's a quiet fracturing of Australian society, sending a message to young Australians that working hard no longer brings you up.
For older Australians, they feel like years of hard work just aren't being rewarded in retirement as the rules of the game keep changing. Australia remains entranced by mining. Iron ore, coal, and LNG dominate our exports. Education follows, but the gap is wide. Our economy leans heavily on digging and exporting. Technology barely gets a look in. Our ranking on the Global Economic Complexity Index has plunged to 105th out of 145 countries assessed. That's below many lower income nations that we'd just rather not be compared with. That highlights in bold the future risks to our prosperity. As technology grows globally, unless something changes right here in Australia, we just won't get our share of the pie. When you can make easy money from digging out what's under the dirt, why invest in high-risk innovation or build technological depth? Well, some politicians are starting to try and answer that. But is it too late for locked-out generations? We saw the slow death of car manufacturing in Australia in the 1990s and early 2000s. While the likes of Liberal MP Andrew Hastie has a nostalgic view that it can be revived, either way, investments in domestic industries holds the key to future generations maintaining the living standards of past generations, with technology at the heart of investments. Australia risks being left with large revenues, but no robust industrial engine beneath. Government spending is at record levels, so we aren't saving the proceeds of the mining booms. And the taxpayer money being spent is largely going into recurrent expenditure that doesn't grow the economy. Superannuation wealth has reached nearly $5 trillion. That's a good thing, but much of it is invested overseas in businesses that don't employ Australians or invest in our domestic economy. If Australia doesn't find better ways to encourage investment locally, it won't matter that superannuation moves up to 12%. It will help some Australians into a more comfortable retirement, but the wider economy will keep getting weaker.
It's an uncomfortable truth. The profits from our mining resources are largely flowing overseas. Meanwhile, the tax revenue that it generates is being spent by the government rather than being saved for a rainy day.
Then there's Australia's gambling problem. A nation of fewer than 30 million people has 18% of the world's poker machines. Australia is less than 1% of the global population, generating nearly 1/5 of the world's usage of pokies. That's a disgrace. We gamble away more than $30 billion every year. For households already under pressure, that's a serious problem government cannot ignore.
And now for the elephant in the room most Australians can see very clearly. Rising immigration. In 2023, 500,000 migrants came to this country, a record. This is fast becoming the barbecue stopper issue people are talking about. Do we need drastic cuts to immigration?
More people places stress on cities, infrastructure and housing supply. Migration has always been part of the Australian story, we know that. But context matters, and right now that context is that we are in a housing crisis. Some argue we need migration for jobs and growth, even to build more homes. The argument being that we don't have enough Australian labourers to do it as it is. But the policy must align with supply-side realities. Sydney's medium home now sells for 14 times the average annual full-time salary. And not everyone works full-time, so they're too expensive right now. Rental burdens have soared. Access to rental properties is getting harder. Mortgage services eats up half the median wage, and new home builds can't keep pace with demand, making the problem even worse. What used to be the foundation of household wealth, owning your own home, is increasingly out of reach for many. For younger couples and renters, it's not just a cost problem. It's fast becoming a wealth building problem too, leaving them behind.
That matters for retirement security, social mobility, and the sense that you're not being locked out of the system, which has its own psychological impact.
Australia risks becoming a renting economy, with capital cities where there are no grandchildren. The fertility rate has even hit a record low, which is one reason politicians keep turning to migration to boost the tax-paying population. Wealth is concentrated at the top. Asset prices are inflated for the property rich, and everyone else is watching their futures fade away.
Australia must now choose, and choose quickly. Remain the lucky country, or become the lucky country only for the very few.
So what can we do about it? First, address supply shortages, build faster and higher, reform approval processes, prioritise affordable dwellings, release more land and loosen the grip of the unions on labour supply in the construction sector in order to boost its ability to meet demand in a price-efficient way. Second, reform the tax system. Scale back incentives favouring investors as opposed to those constructing for owner-occupiers. Review negative gearing and stabilise rental markets looking overseas for inspiration. Next, encourage manufacturing. Scale up tech and mobilise super funds into domestic productivity. A sovereign wealth fund wouldn't be a bad idea either. It would have been a better idea 40 years ago, but it's still not too late. Gambling reform is absolutely essential. Government must stop protecting those profiting from problem gambling. When a country our size has nearly a fifth of the world's poker machines, something is seriously wrong. Next, align migration with infrastructure and housing capacity. This doesn't have to be a xenophobic debate. It's about using migration to help Australian prosperity, rather than oversubscribing simply for the sake of making the Treasurer's budget look better. Finally, cap government spending to force savings rather than more debt. If the politicians are incapable of balancing the books on their own, put rules in place that force them to. Maybe even tie their wages to their performance indicators.
Australia is a wealthy country, but wealth isn't enough if the system funnels it to the very few, leaving a situation where the government is borrowing to simply maintain the myth, the illusion of prosperity.
That doesn't mean we become a Robin Hood economy, stealing from the rich to give to the poor. It's not about hugging socialism tightly. It's about incentivising hard work and rewarding it. Australia can reboot, building housing and hope together, investing in future industries to ensure the social contract holds firm.
But we need ambition amongst our political class to really embrace reform, not the sort of talk of reform that isn't really amounting to a hill of beans. We need that political class to embrace the hard work that's necessary to ensure that all of us, that all Australians can enjoy the prosperity that past generations have enjoyed.